Hi, welcome to another Decisions training video. Today we are going to be discussing the Project Health Score. So, what is it? The Project Health Score is a new feature that was introduced in Decisions version 9 going forward. It's an unweighted mean of all of the designer entity's health calculated under set criteria in the Decisions application. This Project Health Score is a numerical indicator of how healthy your project is as a whole. So let me give you a demonstration on how this is calculated in the Decisions platform, and then we'll get into the details of the project health categories on which this score is based upon. So, if you'll follow me here, this is what the project health dashboard looks like in Decisions. You'll see that big number on the left is going to be the overall project health. And on the right, you have all of the individual designer entities that are a part of this project. On the left, underneath the main project's health score, is the mean of the categories of these designer entities. So we have 2 flows, 1 rule, and 1 report. So the flows category is going to be the average of those flows, the rules category is going to be the average of those rules, and the reports the average of those reports. So, how do you think the project health is calculated? Well, one might start by adding up the individual categories themselves, right, and taking the mean from there. If you do that, you'll get 356. You'll see that there are 4 of them, so in order to calculate our mean, we'll take 356 divided by 4, but that gives us 89. 89 is not the same as 90. So this is not how project health is actually calculated. Instead, project health is calculated from the sum of the categories themselves. You take the mean from these. This will give you 270. There are 3 of them, so you take 270 divided by 3, and you'll see that gives you 90 on the dot. So, as one more overview of how this process works, these individual categories that you see here underneath the entity, which I will go into in a moment, are all averaged to give that entity's specific health score. And then the averages of the entities in that category are taken to give the category project health. This one's going to be for the rules. And then this one's going to be for the reports. And then lastly, those categories are averaged to give you the overall project health. Now let's get into some of those project health scoring criteria. So there are 3 different types of scoring criteria currently available as of Decisions version 9.5 in the Decisions platform for project health. You have maintainability, you have security, and you have performance. All right. Maintainability ensures that you're using good practices to ensure that the project can run when different changes are made to it and when different alterations are made to those pieces of the project. Security is to ensure that the practices that you are putting in place do not create security vulnerabilities within your project for the users. And the third category, performance, is to make sure that you are designing things in the best way possible to maximize the performance of your project. So I'm not going to go into every single possible grading criteria, as we would be here for probably over an hour. But I am going to discuss some major ones that can occur so that you can see how this system works and get an idea for what these categories actually grade you on. I will link the documentation to all of the categories in the description for this video. So let's get into our first category, maintainability. One such grading criteria for maintainability is the entity description. Each word in an entity's description accounts for 5% of the total health score. So if you have no description, you're going to have a 0. But if you have 20 different words or more, you'll have a health score of 100. This is to ensure that you're using comments and descriptions that adequately describe what your entity is trying to do within the larger scope of the project. Another criteria in maintainability are the step names in the flow. So This right here is a flow that is built, and we can see that it's clearly trying to do something, but all of the step names are the generic ones that get created when you bring the step over into the Flow Designer canvas. So this is not the way that you should be naming your flow steps. Instead, we should be giving descriptive names about what the steps accomplish in this process so that anyone else coming into this designer can clearly see what they are trying to accomplish in the flow. Here, we know that we are now fetching fruits, we are getting categories from these fruits, iterating through them, and then we are filtering the food out by category. You may have to go into the individual steps to see how everything is done, but at least you have an idea of what this flow is trying to accomplish now. So let's go into our last criteria for maintainability, which is the unit test count. Every flow and rule should have unit tests. These are good ways that you can continually test if your project is performing how you expect it to, and that you are getting the expected results when you run your tests with data that you know should produce a certain result. The way that this is calculated is if you have 0 unit tests, you get a 0 on whatever you're trying to test. That's just how it works. If you have 1 unit test, you're going to get 50% of your score. And if you get 2+ unit tests, you got 100% in the project category store. You can make as many unit tests as you want to adequately test your project, and we recommend making as many as you need for as much data outcomes as you expect to have. However, you should be making at least 2 to make sure that you can run your test with data that you expect to succeed in a certain way and data you expect to either succeed or fail in another way. Now let's move on to our next category, which is performance. A good example of a performance category criteria is the data type database storage. This ORM warning validates whether the data type can be stored properly in the database. Decisions has ways around this to make sure that you can still store your data type properly, such as if you're storing file data. However, this workaround does have an impact on performance. So we recommend not storing things that will take a long time to fetch or save unless absolutely necessary to your project. You can see whenever this occurs when you're creating a data structure when you see on the bottom right of the creation, warning, incompatible with ORM. Another very important grading criteria within performance are SQL steps. This particular grading criteria checks if you have any raw SQL steps used within your flow. If you have even one of them, you're going to get a 0 in this score. That's because there are almost always better ways to fetch, select, save, or update or delete data than a raw SQL query. For example, using a defined query in Decisions is much more performant than a raw SQL query is going to be. You can make these fairly quickly in the Decisions platform under data types and create database integration type. You can create this query from there that is predefined that runs a lot faster than your raw SQL step. Doing this also allows the developers of your Decisions environment to clearly see what this is trying to accomplish instead of trying to decipher SQL code. In some cases, you can even use an internal service method to accomplish the same task as you would with a query, which is even more performant than the defined query would be. This will not always be the case, and you cannot always make this substitution, but if you can, we recommend doing it for the performance of your project as a whole. The last performance criteria I'm going to discuss here is flow complexity. When you are designing a Decisions flow, you have the option to segment parts of logic of your flow into subflows. This is good for 2 primary reasons. Number 1, it keeps your flow tidy. It's easy to see what the overall process of your flow is, and you can jump into a subflow to see what logic is going on there. The second reason is because you get higher reusability of these subflows that accomplish a particular task that can be used in other flows in your process instead of having to rebuild the same logic over and over again. So right here is an example of what you should not do. A giant complex flow with most of the original step names unchanged that just looks like a giant mess on your flow canvas. This should instead be sectioned off into logically separated, where necessary and where possible, subflows. If you contain more than 30 flow steps in a single flow, you are going to drop your flow complexity health score from 100% to 50%. And if you have more than 60 steps, you'll get a score of 0. So let's go into that last grading criteria category, which is security. The big one on this one is a delete entity step. If you are running a delete entity step in your flow and you have no sort of filtering criteria on it, this could be a security risk, because one run of that flow accidentally and you could delete all entities of an entire data type that you were not meaning to delete. So these should always have filtering criteria unless you are trying to accomplish a very specific purpose in your delete of wiping this entity entirely. You should be very careful when adding a delete entity step into your flow. So let's go into a demo now to show how we can affect the health score of our project by tinkering with it in various ways. Welcome back to My Decisions environment. We are in version 9, and for our demo, we are going to be dissecting a project that lists all the rules in a particular project that have a specified output. So let me run this for you so you see what it does, and then we will look into our details and our project health and go over how to improve that score of 74 right there. So the first thing we're going to do is I will run this flow for you. And let's say that we want to find all of the rules that have an output of true in our environment. When I hit run, here are all the different rules in this project that have that output. So let's go to our project health and see what our problem areas are. So in our main flow that we clicked, it looks like we have a raw SQL step, as well as some improperly named steps for the flow. So we can click on this pencil icon right here, and this will allow us to edit the flow directly. Here we have a raw SQL step that we can replace with a parameterized query, and it looks like our for each step, as well as our create data steps, are not named appropriately. So if we make those changes, let's see how that affects our project health. All right, so I've made those changes now. I'm going to save this and exit our flow. And let's take a look at our project health now. When we go into our utility flow, we'll see that we've removed the SQL steps validation, which is now saying we have 100% because we do not have any anymore. We have a defined query. And we have renamed almost all of the steps in our flow, which has boosted the health score over here. So this has improved the flow's health score, which has in turn improved the category flows health score, which then in turn has improved the project's health score from 74% to 76%. And if you ever make a change that is not caught in the update, you can always click Recalculate Project Health, and it will update your project health dashboard with the new changes you have made. So here we've created a new data structure, which is a result from making our defined query. This has boosted our project health score because now we have the category of data structures contributing to the overall average, and it's 100%. So project health is a good indicator of what areas need to be identified in your flow and improved upon, or perhaps changed altogether, to promote good practices of maintainability, security, and performance. Thank you very much for watching this decisions video. We look forward to seeing you again.